Welcome to my round 3 recap. I'm going to try and keep this really brief because lunch closes in half hour. So let me try and keep this below 10 minutes. But I was playing a player also by the name of Eric from Norway. He's, I think, 12 or 13 years old, and his rating is just below 1900. But he had a really good start to the tournament, I think upsetting someone around 2300 and then also drawing someone higher rated as well. So I knew that the game wasn't going to be easy, and it was probably pretty clear that my opponent is underrated. So I went into the game without too much preparation. I couldn't really find too many of my opponent's games online. So I decided that I just wanted to play chess and avoid too much opening theory. And I chose to play the English opening, another kind of weapon of mine that I've played over the years. And he played pawn c6. The only thing I knew about his repertoire is that he sometimes plays Queen's Gambit accepted, but this usually goes into like a Slav or Caro-Kann type thing. So I decided to play a slightly tricky move order, knight c3, d5, and e3, delaying pawn d4. And he just went for the kind of typical semi-Slav setup. I still delay d4, play queen c2, and then fianchetto on the queen side with b3, bishop b2. And we got to the position after castling, and I'll admit that this wasn't specific preparation. I'm not sure if I've even studied this position specifically, but I knew some ideas, and the move I really wanted to play here was pawn g4. Let me hide the notation, again, avoid spoilers. But pawn g4 is kind of a cool gambit idea, and I just wasn't sure if it's like objectively okay for white. It's probably a little bit dubious. It's calculating takes and then rook to g1. But then there's a 95 move, and yeah, I wasn't sure how to evaluate this. So I wanted to keep things a bit more solid. I played bishop to e2. He played rook e8. And then again, I wanted to play g4, but I wasn't sure, so I ended up playing pawn h3, potentially preparing g4. And there is a possible plan for white to play g4, castle queenside, and then try and attack on the king side, especially with the fianchettoed bishop. But as we're going to see, the game took a different route after he played pawn to e5, a very natural move. Now I strike in the center with pawn to d4. And I actually remembered a game I had studied probably over 10 years ago that went pawn e4, knight d2. It was a game between Timur Gureyev and Ray Robson. I believe they had this position, except the pawn was on h2 and the rook was on f8. And Gureyev won like a really, really nice game with the white pieces, ended up playing g4, g5, castling, and just storming on the king side. Yeah, that didn't happen in this game because my opponent took on d4, and then things simplified a little bit in the center. After knight e5, I take, and then he takes with knight on d5, which I think was a slight mistake. Generally, if you're going to have the isolated pawn, you want to try and keep minor pieces on the board. So I think pawn takes was a little bit more accurate. But after knight takes, I was happy to trade a pair of knights, and black still winds up with this so-called IQP, isolated queen's pawn. And essentially going forward, the game kind of revolves around this pawn. And the general plan for white when I'm playing against the pawn is to try and trade minor pieces and then eventually just double up rooks and hopefully win the pawn later in the game. But of course, first I had to complete development. I castled. Before I castled, I took some time because I had to calculate this weird sack, bishop h3, gh3, queen h4. I concluded it wasn't working for black, but I'm trying to remember. Instead of taking, I think I have f4, which should be okay for white. And then black is going to lose one of these pieces. So I wasn't too scared of bishop h3. My opponent played bishop d7. And then I just wanted to simplify things even more, played knight f3, we traded, and then queen to g5, which simultaneously defends d5, but also hits h3. So nice active move from my opponent. And here I decided to not directly defend h3, but counterattack with rook ft1. And I make it so black can't really take, because after rook d5, Yeah, black is losing something here. So I was happy to see bishop c6. Bishop is now on kind of a passive square. And then after rook d4, I am threatening rook to g4 with the skewer. My opponent plays bishop to e5. I still play rook g4, queen f6. We trade bishops. So overall, I'm just achieving my goal of trading most of the minor pieces. Now I have a happy bishop, and my opponent's bishop is very sad. And most things about this position are just really happy for white. I'm ready to double up, maybe even triple up on the d pawn. And there's a very typical idea when you play against isolated pawn, if the opponent defends it via d8, eventually there's this break e4, because there's going to be the inevitable pin on the d file. And around this point, I was remembering a game between Korchnoi and Karpov, where Karpov was also playing against isolated pawn. And it was just a positional masterpiece. And it featured a very similar position to this, except I think the bishops were off the board. It was just the major pieces. So if anyone's interested in that game, you can Google Korchnoi Karpov isolated pawn and then probably find it. If I find it, I'll leave a link in the description. But anyway, the game continued from here, rook d1, and then things got a little bit weird. After rook f5, queen d2, rook e8, queen d4, my opponent kind of went all in on the king side, played rook to e5, defending the pawn, but leaving the a pawn hanging. And I went ahead and just took the pawn. And then h5. So things were getting a little bit unsettling because it seems like there's a lot of firepower for black, some initiative. Always have to watch out for rook takes f3 with this exchange sack. Also have to watch out for pawn d4. But I found what I think was a nice idea here to just put the rook on g3, a very stable square defending f3. And then after h4, I just moved back to g4. I think everything was under control. I don't think it's ever good for black to take because then I take back. And yeah, there's a line here actually, takes, takes, takes. I think I was going to play rook to d4 and then h4 should fall. There's also queen b8 in the air. So my opponent didn't take on f3. He was falling very low on time, as we see here, already below a minute. I had just under 40 minutes. And then he plays g6. I play rook d4, just trying to solidify. And after rook to g5, I play rook f4. And essentially, I lifted both rooks. So even though the f and g files are closed, I'm still making use of them with the rooks. And then I end up winning another pawn after takes, takes, threw in the check, and then took on h4. So not only am I up 2 pawns here, but I also have a mating attack, threatening mate in 1. And the finish of the game was kind of funny because my opponent's king went for a small stroll. And yeah, it wasn't actually easy to find the clear mate, even though the king was like just smack in the center on e6. But eventually I found my way, gave a few checks, and then I found a line here essentially to win the rook is to play queen a3, king e6, and then bishop g4. The point being that I'm provoking f5. F5 wasn't played, but if it is played, I would take the queen, bring the bishop back, and there's no way for black to stop h4, trapping the rook on g5. So my opponent played rook takes g4, maybe hoping that I would automatically recapture and blunder my queen, but I took first, and he resigned, given that white's going to be up the exchange and a couple pawns. So that was round 3. I think overall, pretty smooth game. I was happy with opening choice and just the instructive positional nature. I left the window open and there's a bug that I think is trying to attack me, so I better end it now. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more recaps. I'll see you guys later.